So we'll talk with Walker Stapleton about it at 10 o'clock. But first, I want to get to a request from the Weld County GOP party chair, my good friend, Karen Pelzer. You hear me talk about her all the time she's one of the proprietors of William Moore Jewelers, the Sweetheart Store. And many of you know her in that dual capacity. But she sent out an email yesterday. And it really is, the subject is negative campaigning, a message from Weld GOP chair Karen Pelzer. Now, this really is directed, from my interpretation of it, directed at House District 48. And let me say this, and we've talked about this a little bit on the show, and I'm only going to do it in this one segment today. I'm not going to get too much into the minutia and weeds of it. But because I've talked about it in the past. But House District 48, Jeffrey Hare versus Steve Humphrey. Now, you don't really hear from Steve Humphrey. You hear from Jeff Hare all the time. Steve Humphrey has supporters who, instead of advancing his take on issues, his perspective, spend most of their time attacking Jeff Hare and sending out flyers and things that are just bold-faced lies. I'm sorry, there's no other way to put it. They're not accurate. And they're meant to distort, and they're meant to be inflammatory. And that is the tactic that the Steve Humphrey supporters are taking. They are not being truthful about Jeff Hare. And they do it because a lot of times negative campaigning works. And frankly, for those of us who have to see this or have to be insulted by it, if you are a supporter of Jeff Hare, you have been insulted by it. And as I said a number of times, I was going to stay out of this. Wasn't my fight to have. But then I saw the distortions of Jeff Hare weren't accurate. And unless we stand up to this kind of negative campaigning, and not just negative campaigning, but they're lies. They're just flat out lies. Unless we stand up to it, then we must be condoning it. So you either condemn it or you condone it. And a couple of the things that have been thrown out there, I love this, from people who claim to be good conservatives and people who claim to, their Christian values and everything, and they are trying to absolutely destroy a very good man in Jeff Hare. Whether you agree or disagree with his positions, the way they are trying to destroy him, not exactly the kind of values that many of us do have. So when they say things like, I got this from a good source yesterday, called me and said, you're not going to believe what's on the corner on a street corner here in Greeley along Highway 34. A guy in a chicken suit waving a sign that says, Hare hates guns, which is just not even accurate. It's meant to be inflammatory. It's a lie. It's not even accurate. The other one, and I guess if Jeffrey Hare hates guns, then I hate guns, then many of my friends hate guns, then many other people in Weld County and House District 48 hate guns. My husband hates guns. We all hate guns because we support Jeffrey Hare. So I guess it isn't just Jeffrey Hare, but all of the people who have endorsed him and support him hate guns. The other one, where the two men are kissing and you got the flyer and it says Jeffrey Hare's vision of Weld County and that he's part of the radical homosexual agenda. That's where the dark music should come in and da-da-da. Well, I guess that means all of us who support Jeff Hare then must be part of it as well. I mean, it's so ridiculous. And then the flyer that essentially put Barack Obama and Jeffrey Hare, equating them as, a Republican that only Barack Obama would love and liberal Boulder would love Jeffrey Hare. Again, it's meant to destroy a good man rather than advance their own candidate. Now, again, you want to go after somebody on issues? I don't care. I do it all the time. I'll go after Republicans if they're bad on issues. Nothing made me madder than House Bill 1365 and those who supported that. But I'm not going to go around distorting their position or personal attacks on them. Why? Because I would still rather have those guys in the state legislature than have a leftist progressive. So when you say that Hare hates guns, it's just a lie. And you destroy your own credibility. And frankly, you're destroying your own candidate, I think. That's my perspective. But Karen Pelzer wrote this, and she asked that I share it, and I'm happy to do so. It says, the 11th commandment, thou shalt not speak ill of a fellow Republican. Well, I'm guilty of doing that. Mostly because, and again, go after their positions. And when Republicans behave badly, go after that. But to say Hare hates guns, that he's part of the radical homosexual agenda, to say he's essentially the equivalent of Barack Obama, just is meant to destroy a good man, with whom they would probably agree on so many levels. She goes on to say, today as we enter the final weeks of the 2012 primary season, some are once again focusing on the negative. Republicans are attacking Republicans up and down the state. And while the Weld County Republican Party does not, rightfully so, control the behavior of campaigns or special interest groups, certainly within my purview as the chair to provide some insight into the process. She actually goes on to talk about the movie could be called Democrats Run Amok. But it's really the subtitle, Republicans Gone Wild, with the talking about how this election could be Democrats gave 2012 election to Republicans on a silver platter. Instead, Republicans broke the platter. In other words, if we return to our conservative roots and don't destroy ourselves and our candidates in the process, we can win. Today, I want to focus once again on the don't destroy our candidates in the process part. There are two sides in the Republican Party. And before you start saddling up your high horse, let me point out that both sides have done their fair share of negative campaigning in the past and in the present. So true. On the one side, can't forget that it was Holtzman who, in the gubernatorial primary, unwittingly gave Democrats the catchy phrase, both-way Bobs. Both-way Bobs, referring to Bob Beaupre, and he eventually lost. She goes on to talk more about it, but she said, regardless of which candidate wins in the primary on June 26th, some Republicans will be faced with voting for somebody who may not be their candidate or supporting them. Now, we know that in House District 48, there isn't a Democrat, so this is the race. But let me put it this way. This is about power. This is not about principles at this point. This is about power. Who is going to decide House District 48? I'll support whoever wins, but I will say this. I have been so turned off. And if you condone lying about a fellow conservative, a good man, you can. If you don't condemn that, then frankly, you must be condoning it, because that's ridiculous. Jeffrey Hare doesn't deserve to be treated this way. Again, if you dislike his issues, fine. But to distort them and say, if you dislike his position on issues, fine. But don't distort his positions by saying Hare hates guns, he's part of the radical homosexual agenda, that he's the same as Barack Obama. That's just not even accurate. And all you do is lose your own credibility while you try to destroy a decent person in the process, with whom my guess is those folks who support this kind of campaigning would agree with him 99.9% of the time. It is amazing to me. But that's not what it's about. It's about who gets to decide who the GOP candidate will be in House District 48. I'll tell you what, I am well past due for a break. 9:21 the time. We'll take a quick break. Point being, negative campaigning ends up saying, this kind of negative campaigning ends up saying more about the folks who condone it than the person they're attacking.